I grew up thinking disrespect was just part of family life. My dad was the kind of man who could make a whole room freeze with just one glance. He trained me from a young age to report on my mom, every mistake, every slip-up. If I didn't, he'd make sure I understood the consequences. I was 5 when my mom accidentally burned my grilled cheese sandwich. I cried instinctively. It was my favorite meal. My mom immediately tried to quiet me, but the sound of my dad's footsteps coming down the stairs made her go pale. She whispered for me to go to my room. I did, but I heard everything through the door. He yelled at her like she was the worst failure he'd ever met, berating her for not even being able to make food for her child. Then came the sound. I ran back out, heart racing, and found her on the floor. I kneeled beside her, hugging her tightly, and my dad sneered. I was too young to understand what was happening, but I knew it wasn't right. Over time, he made me into his personal informant. If my mom left the house a mess, was late picking me up, spent too long on the phone, I had to report it. He said it was to make her better. It became my daily role. My mom would sometimes beg me to report to him, fearing what would happen if I didn't. I thought this was normal. It wasn't until I went to a friend's house and his mom slightly burned a burger bun that I realized something was different. I tensed, waiting for yelling or a slap. Instead, his dad just laughed and joked. I left that house more confused than I'd ever been. Coming home from that visit, I found my mom crying on the kitchen floor. My dad was asleep upstairs. I helped her, whispered that I loved her, and for a moment, she just held on to me, silently crying. The next day, I went to the police. I blurted out everything. A social worker promised to visit our house that night. I was told there'd be emergency housing for my mom and me if needed. When she came, my mom answered the door, bruises and all. But my dad, as always, was one step ahead. He told her it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd been in a car accident, that I had issues with lying. The social worker left, apologizing for the trouble. As I tried to escape upstairs, my dad grabbed me. I'll never repeat the things he said, but I'll never forget waking up in my room the next morning, everything aching. My mom quietly cleaning my wounds. We never spoke of it again. Back to the old game. My dad tightened the rules. I had to report every mistake or face consequences. My mom and I were both terrified of him and of what would happen if we didn't follow his rules. One day at school, I broke down in the bathroom. That's when I met Hugo. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just sat with me. Over the next few weeks, we became friends. When he saw the bruises, he didn't push, just offered kindness, an extra sandwich, a rock he found, small things that meant everything. Eventually, I told him a bit, just that my dad got angry. He said his cousin had been through something similar and got help. It gave me hope. For the first time, I thought maybe I could get out. I started lying to stay later at school, telling my dad I had study groups. He bought it because my grades improved, but I was always afraid. He'd show up randomly at school, questioning me about who I spoke to, demanding every detail. One afternoon, Hugo invited me to his house. I panicked. I hadn't been to a friend's since Jacob's house. When I saw that burnt bun and realized my life was different, I declined. My dad would know, and I was right to be afraid. The next night, he asked about my day in chilling detail, even mentioned Hugo. Apparently my mom had told him, "Invite him over sometime," he said with a smile that made my stomach turn. Eventually he made good on that threat, said he ran into Hugo's dad. Small town, after all. "They're coming for dinner this weekend," he told me casually. I panicked. I tried to warn Hugo. "Don't come," I begged, but it was too late. His parents were excited. They thought it was a normal get-together. They had no idea. Dinner was a nightmare. My dad was charming, attentive, funny. My mom wore long sleeves. I sat stiffly, barely touching my food. Hugo tried to steer the conversation toward his mom's work as a nurse and the abuse cases she'd seen. My dad masterfully redirected the topic, laughing warmly, then shooting me a glance that sent a chill through my spine. Later, in my room, Hugo whispered, "Your dad seems nice. Are you sure?" I wanted to scream. "Yes, I'm sure," I hissed. "He's fooling you, just like he fools everyone else." After they left, my dad closed the door behind them and smirked. "Nice family, though Hugo has quite the imagination, doesn't he?" He said Hugo had been telling stories and that I wasn't to see him anymore. Upstairs, I heard him tell my mom that if she let me near Hugo again, there'd be consequences. She just agreed. At school the next day, Hugo confronted me. His parents thought I was making it all up. I tried to explain that my dad always won people over, that they wouldn't believe me, and sadly, I was right. Over the next few weeks, my dad went into overdrive. making sure Hugo was erased from my life. He told the school counselor that Hugo was a bad influence and requested. He told Hugo's parents I had behavioral issues and a history of lying. He even suggested I might need therapy. Slowly but surely, Hugo was pulled away from me, my only friend, the only person who had tried to help. The final blow came when Hugo's parents found texts I'd sent describing. Instead of believing them, they banned Hugo from seeing me altogether. Hugo stopped talking to me at school. I'd see him from across the cafeteria, laughing with other kids, and I'd feel like I was on the outside of a life I couldn't reach. My dad, satisfied that he had destroyed any lifeline I had, began to relax at home. He smiled more, but it wasn't warmth, it was smugness. He had won. My mom retreated further into herself. She did everything perfectly, terrified of making a mistake. Sometimes she looked at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Other times, she looked at me with frustration, as if blaming me for making things worse. One night, I overheard my dad through their bedroom door. "The boy's turning out just like you," he said, his voice laced with contempt. Weak, pathetic. My dad, cheerful as ever, buttered his toast. "She got that because you haven't been keeping up with your reporting," he said matter-of-factly. "Is that what you want? For her to suffer because you're lazy?" That's when I knew I needed to do something. If adults weren't going to help, I would help myself. I began keeping a secret journal. I documented everything, dates, times, what my dad said and did. I hid it beneath a loose floorboard in my closet. Every entry was a defiant little act, my truth finally recorded. But one day, I left it out. I don't even remember why. When I returned from the bathroom, my dad was sitting on my bed, flipping through it. "Interesting stories," he said, voice cool. "Quite the imagination you have." I froze, helpless. He began tearing the journal apart, page by page. "Did you really think this would help?" he asked, scattering the torn pieces like confetti. "Who would believe you over me? I'm a respected businessman. You're just a kid who lies." He walked toward me until my back hit the wall. "If I ever find something like this again, what happens to your mother will be your fault. Understand?" I nodded, sobbing. After he left, I gathered the shredded remains of my only hope. But something inside me had changed. I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. So I found another way. I went to Hugo, desperate. I asked to borrow his phone, the old one his parents didn't check anymore. He gave it to me without hesitation. That night, I began documenting everything digitally. I recorded my dad's outbursts through the walls. I stashed the phone in hidden spots, behind books, inside cereal boxes, taped under the table. I collected video of him making me list my mom's mistakes while she cried in the corner. For 2 weeks, I built a case. I pretended to be compliant, even more helpful than usual, so he wouldn't suspect anything. Each act of obedience was a smokescreen, but just as things were falling into place, he noticed me hawking to Hugo at school. That night, he told Hugo's parents that Hugo had stolen money from our house. A complete lie. They believed him. Again. Hugo was grounded, phone privileges revoked. I lost the only person who knew what was happening. Still, I had the phone and all the evidence. I just needed someone to trust. I remembered a teacher, Mrs. Kayla, who once asked about a bruise on my arm. I'd lied, of course, but she seemed to genuinely care. One afternoon, I approached her after class. "Can I talk to you?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. She cleared a space at her desk. "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on?" I showed her the photos, played her some recordings. Her face went pale. "How long has this been happening?" she whispered. "As long as I can remember." She promised to help, for real this time. As a mandated reporter, she had to notify authorities, but she would do it differently. She'd contact the social worker again, involve the police, and make sure no one could be manipulated this time. That week was unbearable. I acted normal, smiled, reported. I played the perfect son while counting down the hours. Then, Friday came. After school, Mrs. Kayla whispered, "It's happening tonight, 7:00 p.m. I nodded, heart racing. That evening, I nearly broke under the tension. My dad was in a good mood. That made it worse. He whistled in the kitchen while making a sandwich. At 6:30, my dad got a call from work, some problem he needed to deal with. By some miracle, he left the house, saying he'd be back in an hour. I ran to my mom. "They're coming. The social worker, a police officer, tonight." Her face went white. No, you know what happened last time. It's different this time," I said. "I have proof." At exactly 7:00, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Kayla, I opened the door, my hands trembling. Miss Deborah, the same social worker from before, stood on the porch. This time, she wasn't alone. A police officer, Officer Drew, stood beside her, along with a woman named Salam, who introduced herself as a child advocate. Behind them, parked across the street, I saw Mrs. Kayla in her car, watching, giving me a small, reassuring nod. "Hello again," Miss Deborah said gently. "May we come in?" I stepped aside. My mom appeared behind me, frozen in place. Miss Deborah immediately noticed everything. "Mrs. Johnson, we need to talk." We sat in the living room while I showed them the phone, the pictures, the recordings. Each new piece of evidence was like a weight lifting from my chest. My mom cried silently the entire time. "He said they'd take my son away, that no one would believe me." Her voice cracked. "And he was right. You didn't." "I made a mistake," Miss Deborah said, visibly shaken. "But we're here now. We're not leaving until you're both safe." Then we heard it. Tires on the driveway, a car door slamming. My dad was back early. My blood turned to ice. "He's home." Officer Drew stood, positioning himself between us and the door. "Stay calm. Let me handle this." My dad walked in, stopping cold when he saw the strangers in his living room. For a split second, he was confused. Then he saw me, and his eyes went cold. "What's this?" he said, deceptively calm. He turned to my mom. "What did you do?" Before she could answer, Officer Drew stepped forward. "Sir, I'm Officer Drew with the county police. We're here investigating reports." My dad's expression flipped. He put on the mask, the one I'd seen so many times. Concerned, rational, confused. "There must be some mistake," he said, voice soothing. "My son has a history of fabricating stories for attention." "I don't have a therapist," I said, voice shaking but firm. "That's another lie." He turned to me, furious. "See what I mean? The boy needs help. We have photographic evidence and audio recordings," Officer Drew said calmly. "Your son has been documenting for weeks." For the first time, I saw fear in my dad's eyes, real fear. "I want to see this evidence," he said, taking a step forward. "Sir, stay where you are." He didn't. He lunged toward me. "You ungrateful little—" He never finished. Officer Drew moved fast, restraining him. "This is ridiculous. I'm a respected member of the community. Ronald Johnson, you're under arrest," Officer Drew said as he cuffed him. My dad kept yelling all the way out the door that we'd regret this, that he'd be back. But his words didn't matter anymore. He was gone. The house felt different, lighter, like we could finally breathe. Miss Deborah turned to us. "We'll place you in emergency housing tonight. You'll be safe." Counseling, court procedures, protective orders. It was overwhelming, but it was real. We had option. We had help. That night, we packed only essentials and moved into a small, secure apartment. It wasn't much. Plain walls, secondhand furniture. But it was the first place I'd ever lived where I didn't feel fear every second. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. My dad hired a lawyer, tried to paint me as a troubled child, my mom as unstable, but the evidence was too strong. Photos, audio, documentation. The truth didn't need embellishment. Hugo's family finally came around. When they saw the evidence, they were horrified. His dad kept apologizing. His mom, the nurse, had helped document the bruises for our court case. He had been the only one who believed me when it mattered most. Mrs. Kayla checked on me often, bringing cookies and books. "I'm proud of you," she said once. "What you did took courage." I shrugged. "I just did what I had to. That's what courage is," she said simply. Eventually, the court granted full custody to my mom. A permanent restraining order kept my dad 500 feet away from us. He took a plea deal, served 2 years, likely less with good behavior. It didn't feel like justice, but it was enough for us to start over. My mom started therapy, joined a support group. She stood taller, spoke more confidently, got a job at a bookstore, something she'd never been allowed to do. I started therapy too. It was hard, but it helped. Slowly, I learned to trust peace again. 3 months later, we moved into a small apartment of our own. My mom painted the living room yellow. I picked blue for my room. We got mismatched furniture, hung art that didn't align perfectly, and for once, none of it mattered. It was ours. One night, I found her on the balcony, looking at the stars. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled, really smiled. Not completely, but I'm getting there. She was right. We both were. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to come home. He had been the only one who believed me when it mattered most. Mrs. Kayla checked on me often, bringing cookies and books. "I'm proud of you," she said once. "What you did took courage." I shrugged. "I just did what I had to. That's what courage is," she said simply. Eventually, the court granted full custody to my mom. A permanent restraining order kept my dad 500 feet away from us. He took a plea deal, served 2 years, likely less with good behavior. It didn't feel like justice, but it was enough for us to start over. My mom started therapy, joined a support group. She stood taller, spoke more confidently. Got a job at a bookstore, something she'd never been allowed to do. I started therapy too. It was hard, but it helped. Slowly, I learned to trust peace again. 3 months later, we moved into a small apartment of our own. My mom painted the living room yellow. I picked blue for my room. We got mismatched furniture, hung art that didn't align perfectly, and for once, none of it mattered. It was ours. One night, I found her on the balcony, looking at the stars. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled, really smiled. Not completely, but I'm getting there. She was right. We both were. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to come home. He had been the only one who believed me when it mattered most. Mrs. Kayla checked on me often, bringing cookies and books. "I'm proud of you," she said once. "What you did took courage." I shrugged. "I just did what I had to. That's what courage is," she said simply. Eventually, the court granted full custody to my mom. A permanent restraining order kept my dad